Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha. I head up brand awareness at Reveal. On each episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest today is Brad Carver. Brad Carver is eDiscovery Manager at DaVita. Brad, welcome.
Thank you, George. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. I'd like us to start, as I often do, by having you tell us a little bit about how you got to what you do today and just what it is you do today anyway. So let's start with the how you got there part.
Yeah, so I moved and started to sell mortgages back in 2005, and obviously that didn't last too long. So I fell back into IT and got a contract job pulling emails off of tape for eDiscovery, and that's kind of how I got into it, and that was about 15 years ago.
So a glamorous start.
Yeah, oh yeah. Fun.
Yeah. Remind me, what was that process like, or is like, because it still happens?
It was quite a process. I mean, you have to have special tools for that to be able to read the tape. And then the way it was managed with us is there'd be somebody pulling the backup off of the backup, which there could be hundreds upon hundreds of mailboxes in these backups. And our job as the contractor was we would get a list of names of custodians, and we would have to go find their mailboxes. And then to the next tape too, because depending on the employment and how long the date range was, you would have to find it. And sometimes they would jump servers. And at one point I was working on over 8 PCs at one time. With KVM switches just bouncing back and forth, just so I would stay awake.
Yeah. Well, how did you get then from there to where you are now?
That contract ended, and I was fortunate enough to pick up another contract with that company because I was very intrigued at that point. Just paid attention to, just working in that atmosphere. And I kept up with the group, and it was probably about 7 months later, after my contract ended, that a position opened up, and they reached out to me, and I was with that team for a little over 10 years, and now I've been with DaVita for about 2.5.
What do you do at DaVita?
I currently am the eDiscovery manager, which is kind of, I would say, broad, right? I feel like a lot of my focus has been on processes and automation where possible, which has kept me certainly busy.
Is your remit limited to eDiscovery, or do you spill over into areas like information governance?
Yeah, so the way we're kind of built here is those teams are part of the same team. So yeah, there is some overflow with that. And we've been bringing in M365. And looking at the whole purview aspect of that, and those silos, if you will, within purview, you have to pay attention to that moving forward. And because a lot of these things, if the teams that make these decisions and make those changes don't collaborate and let each other know, I mean, they can really affect the company especially downstream in those eDiscovery processes.
If you then are a company on what, like Exchange Server using journaling and the like, and you've made the decision, or you're trying to decide whether to make the decision to move to M365, what is that part of it like?
There's a lot that I can't even speak about because it's over my head. But being a part of the HLD with this process, there's a lot to think about. And with journaling, like that, in the way we've done it with the FileNet, I mean, all these they're single individual emails. So it's just about the process and taking it one step at a time with the migration to make sure it's right.
And for those who don't know what journaling is, I mean, you
So
explained it
yeah,
in part, but give us greater detail.
so yeah, journaling is the aspect and in real high level. I mean, you're bringing it right out of Exchange with a set amount of time, like maybe 24 hours, and then you're putting it into a separate entity where you store and keep those emails. And within that is where your retention is built.
If you are then planning on a migration from that type of setup to M365, what does that migration entail?
Well, we've not fully executed it, so there's a lot of parts that I haven't seen, but it's about really first looking at metadata and making sure you're doing the right things with making you sure that you capture all that when it's brought over. And then, with IT and waves, it's actually it's a production. There's a lot in the whole process of this. And it's not like you push a button and it's done by any means.
So many, many steps involved.
Correct. Yes. Very many.
How does Purview fit into that part of the process, or is Purview then something you use only afterwards?
Well, yeah, it is. You got to really think about it right and make sure you don't get errors. So you got to think about, the first process is migrating the mailbox. And if you have any ongoing holds with those folks that are getting migrated, you need to set up that legal hold right away. There is some buffer there, but that's something you've got to, you want to get done right away. On bringing the old stuff out of the journal, that'll be another process too, because you have those date scopes which could go back years upon years. And when you throw that older data in there, depending on where, I mean, those date scopes, you have to figure out what you have to do to make sure that they stay intact, which might be you have to go re-index that whole legal hold.
So you've got to figure out what mailboxes you're bringing over. Then for each of those mailboxes, you have to figure out where they are. You have to figure out what's been journaled, whether they are journaled as well. You've got to figure out where that information is. Then you've got to set things up in the new location so that when you bring the content over, it doesn't immediately get deleted because it's out of a time frame.
Correct. And it's another level to that too, George, because it's not at that point, like moving the mailbox is only going to be 6 months.
Yeah.
The journaling is not a mailbox. It's just tons of emails.
Right. Tons of individual emails, right?
Correct. Yep. So there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah. What ways could that go wrong that you need to plan for?
The biggest scare to me right off the bat is the metadata. Your footers and your headers, and that's kind of where some of this goes over my head. I've only learned about this FileNet with working with DaVita, and I'm not a pro at it at any means, but there's complications, and these are pain points we've had for a while. And when you're dealing with that many files, it's tough to get through all that and manage how you export and do all the things with all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of things you gotta calculate before you even push a button.
Do people often turn to outside resources to help them with something like this?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially just to, before we even do any actions, to talk through the actions and see, make sure that this is the right way to go, with looking at everything, and make sure that we can, document and make sure that we do everything to the best that we can.
I would think that one of the many challenges could be in trying to determine how much data you're ultimately going to move over, how much space it's going to occupy, and what the financial implications are of that.
That's a great point. And I mean, so, looking at this big picture, this is change, right? I mean, change is hard. Um, People don't like change. So managing that in effect, yeah. And to me, um, with this change, I see opportunity because, it's almost like, when you move, you kind of clean house first, right? Let's go through everything and let's make sure, if we haven't touched it in 7 years, why do we need it? So to me, there's a lot of opportunity, uh, to your point, the numbers, and when you look at that up top of leadership and everything, they're always looking at numbers, right? Um, and that's another tough point too, is getting that kind of up the ladder explained efficiently enough where they understand to make that effect work downhill to accompany all that, which that's the tough part.
So tell me about some of the nuances in that part of the process.
Well, the nuances is I think the nuances are created by, um, sometimes just how it's communicated, if that makes any sense. Um, and it's just trying to get past that, um, is sometimes the challenge. And it's just a matter of having all the right people in all the right places.
Is
Another
is
tough
it is it communication with amongst the team members who are doing this work, communication with the end users, communication with others, all of the above?
I don't know if I could pinpoint it, but I think sometimes, where things are slowed down is communicating it up and getting to the right points so it can be led, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
How then does moving the data from where it's been on Exchange server, on backup tapes, on FileNet or whatever archiving system you're using, and into M365 change how you work with the data on a moving forward basis?
That's the exciting part. Yeah, I mean, honestly, our tool belt looks totally different. Now it's going to be challenging for a while in the interim, because think about it, we got data in two different, managing that in itself.
Mhm.
But we got good plans in place. But yeah, the end result is great, and I think it's great for this company. I think it's great for our team. I think it's great for practitioners. Because I mean, practitioners, we're the one that busy bees, right? Um, so yeah, and sometimes that's another challenge, getting the busy bees views, and they're in there all the time doing it. Reporting that up to where it's
Yeah.
understood and yeah, and heard. But I think it's a great thing. Now, I've got to experience this twice now. So I did with Cardinal too, and our team really wasn't involved too much with the eDiscovery part of Purview, or it was called the Compliance Center back then, I believe. Um, but yeah, in all the aspects of that. So we were kind of just thrown in there, and we made it happen and whatnot. But now looking at it, going through this, I mean, it's just a totally different look, and being able to think about that and seeing the things that are coming, depending on how you do stuff. But I mean, I think every corporation, you get to a point where some of it you just send out, and the repercussion of the downstream on because of how you're doing it in Purview. I mean, all these things coming together in these processes. To me, these are kind of the fun things, challenging, but fun to get it on paper. And then, then you always have another challenge of it's usually more than one challenge of, okay, is this how we're going to operate? Is this how we're going to flow? Are we good with this? And having all the, everybody, shareholders and everybody on board with that, it's another level to it. So,
right. There's a difference between what you could do and what you choose to do ultimately.
Right. Yeah.
What possibilities are opened up with this transition? What things will you be able to do that you couldn't do, or do better than you could before?
I think just what and when and if we send stuff out the door, I think we have a lot more control over not sending stuff that is irrelevant, that is nothing but another dollar or 10. That right there, really get down to the data. I think that gives us the possibility where I don't think we've seen here. And that's why I say it's exciting. But yeah, there's the different workflows and the different streams. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities for, I think really cost reduction is the biggest one in front of my face I see. Now it's going to be a change. I mean, there's going to be more processes and things that, well, to me are just eDiscovery. I mean, eDiscovery, it's, this, and this. I mean, this is the law we're dealing with, right?
So what changes make it more streamlined in terms of cost? How does it become a lower cost activity now?
Just by controlling the data that you have and where it's going. To me, and then there's the risk aspect to it as well, which there's a dollar sign to that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know it, but yeah, and just what you keep too. I mean, yeah, and once again, that all depends on how and what's agreed to, and then how you build out your processes and manage that. And I mean, this is eDiscovery. It's not one size fits all.
Not at all. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you're going to have different processes in my mind for individual practice groups, if you will. I mean, that's probably the way to narrow it down the fastest. And then even there, you're going to have nuances, or you're going to have the one-offs that's just like, okay, I've never seen this before, but those are the things we're always ready for, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And of course, you still have all the data that's not in Microsoft.
Correct. Oh yeah, and the
rest of that.
Right. Yeah, and then that's another migration, right? How do you manage that? How do you, do you leave it to the employee to move that? Which people ask, but I mean, these are things that thought about. And what about that metadata? And there's, moving SharePoints. And then to me, it should be all about cleanup, right? In this opportunity, I mean, to have this, it's the best time to clean up and get rid of stuff that you just don't need.
One of the concerns when it comes to cleanup long has been that if you are in a situation, which most large companies are, where you've got at least some people under hold for some reason. When you go to sweep out all those dust bunnies under the bed, so to speak, you don't want to sweep out dust bunnies that should stay under the bed.
Right.
It's been a long been a problem. How do you deal with that part of it?
It's your process and how you process and planning about how you enter into that. And to me, that's one of the first things that should be thought about is, okay, what about these folks we do have on litigation hold? First and foremost, do they have anything? I mean, if they don't have anything, let's move on.
Yeah.
Second, what is our plan with that? And then, I mean, high levelly, I mean, I really don't care after that. I mean, I do, but I mean, as long as that is covered, me and my team and everything that we do, we're doing our job to the company.
Yeah. So I'll ask it a slightly different way. I'll go back to the days when I used to have to wrestle with what do we do about the stuff on backup tapes? And the challenge frequently was, well, we've got a tape, we don't know what's on it. How do we know whether we can get rid of the tape when we don't know what's on the tape? Does that type of problem persist, or has that become less of an issue?
No, it hasn't that I've been involved with since quite a while for me, and I hope it never comes up. And that, yeah, you have to open the can, right? I mean, and honestly, that's the big problem with all these things, right? Is because we know about it, we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So you have to open the can. A lot of times you probably don't want to, but I mean, at that point you're obligated, and you kind of hope to learn something from those situations where, I mean, we're in a different world right now. I mean, we're not putting stuff on a hard drive and taking it to a cage, and we have to label it properly, and then make sure we did an evidence tag for it and chain of custody is there. I mean, those things all still matter very much, but I mean, we don't have that.
You don't have that physical part.
The physical part of it, but I mean, we still have these situations where, I mean, people leave, they come, go. I mean, the owners, I mean, all that stuff has to be a thought about. And I still feel like corporations lose a lot there in that aspect. I mean, I understand everybody's replaceable to certain, but I mean, if those records, I kind of don't like the word record, but if those,
it's such a charged word. I remember being at an ARMA meeting many years ago, and there was a panel of us, 4 lawyers, talking about eDiscovery. This was on Navy Pier in Chicago, and we were in an auditorium at the far east end of the pier out in the lake, which had a beautiful domed roof, but it was a large space. So we were on the dais up front. Then the room was divided into 2 sections, left and right. They had an aisle between the sections where people were seated and a microphone near us. And the way we were supposed to do it was we were supposed to do our piece and then allot a period of time at the end for questions. We were not to take questions until the end. The instructions we received were very clear about that. So when it was time for questions, people lined up in front of the microphone, and there was one person there who was really angry about everything we had said. You could hear it in his voice. It sounded like he had someone clasping around his throat. It was so tight. One of the things he wanted to impart to us was that he and the other records managers decided what were records. We, the attorneys, did not. And if they said something was not a record, we had to keep our grubby little mitts off of it. So yeah, record is a very charged term.
Yes, it is. And then, I mean, you brought another aspect to it. Who controls the definition of a record?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. And I'm sure a lot of corporations deal with that. Um, and it's still a question. What is a record, right?
Right. And it's an important question if you are keeping records for record keeping purposes. You get into eDiscovery, it doesn't matter whether it's a record.
No.
That's irrelevant. Yeah. Much to that guy's chagrin. So you've got all of that to deal with.
A record that doesn't need recorded is not a record. It's an email.
Yeah. Yep. It's just a communication. And if you don't have a reason to keep it.
Yeah. Just so I can remember, Mike said yes.
Yep. Now, there's another facet to all of this that has been introduced or is being introduced, not just with you, but with everybody. So you're going to have content in M365. You're going to have Purview to work with this. You could also have in the mix Copilot. What does that do to everything?
Yeah, I'm trying to get up on that, George, because I'm only just recently learning about that myself. I mean, it's
only just recently there to learn about, right?
Right. Yeah, and then so it's going to be, there's rules around it, so you can turn it on or off within the corporation. You can set retention to it, and then you can set legal holds, and it is discoverable. And what are they called? It's an interaction. So it would be the field you would use to pinpoint that down and find that. But yeah, that's another part of the beast, and the beast of Microsoft 365. I mean, I was in a user group yesterday talking about the changes and everything that has come down through just for eDiscovery. And in 2023 alone, there's already been more updates than there was days. And Microsoft's even pulled off of that a little bit because of Copilot. Like they pushed reporting and back down the roadmap because of Copilot. So yeah, there's so much to learn, and so much.
And then so much to relearn, and so much to unlearn, and so much to learn differently again.
And the unlearning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it interesting, but exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and then there will inevitably be questions about if you are preserving or retaining or whatever you want to use as a word, something that's associated with Copilot, what's actually being kept? And what do you have access to what's kept, and how meaningful is any of that anyway, once you try to go look at it?
So many levels. And then, yeah, I mean, do you collect that and take it to a reset and then narrow down to that with cloud attachments that might be, and you have to learn. I mean,
yeah.
But I hear it's going to be expensive.
Well, I don't know. I looked at pricing a while back, and it certainly looked expensive to me then. I don't know. I haven't tried to find out recently what the pricing looks like.
We shall see.
We shall see. And there too, I don't know which license. Is it an E3 license? Is it an E5 license that's required? Because those aren't the same prices.
No, they're not. And then your discovery tools are not the same between the two either. So there's another. So what are you going to get? An E3 and Copilot, but you can't preserve it?
I see complicated flow charts.
A lot of if statements.
Yeah, a lot of if, then else, and then what else? Yeah. Well, for anybody else who's just embarking upon this whole process, any in the last, say, 40 seconds, some words of wisdom for them.
Just don't feel the water, jump in.
That's
I mean, that's it in a nutshell. High level, but yep.
well, that's my practice in the Minnesota lake, even in the middle of summer, because it's still too cold to just kind of walk in slowly.
Yeah. It gives you life.
Yeah, something like that. Well, Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, George, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, Brad Carver is the eDiscovery Manager at DaVita. I am George Socha, and this has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. And yet again, thank you.